Shown on a dark evening, a group of soldiers storm a plane after receiving reports it has been hijacked. One of the victims actually begs them not to enter, warning that something unexplainable is trapped inside. Sure enough, as soon as the soldiers step in, they are suddenly attacked. The scene shifts to a morning at an airbase in Scotland. The atmosphere turns hectic as the airport prepares for the emergency landing of the reported hijacked plane. Colonel Alan Drummond quickly arrives to take control of the situation. As soon as he gets there, an officer reports that both the pilot and co-pilot are most likely dead. They also receive intel that at least one person on board is on Germany's terrorist watch list. Alan heads into the control room, where one officer begins communicating with a passenger, guiding them through the process of landing the plane, while another monitors the landing path. Though rough, the landing is successful. Alan immediately requests visuals and tries contacting the passengers to assess the situation. Suddenly, movement is spotted at one of the doors. A parachute is dropped, carrying a young boy descending. Under Alan's orders, the team rushes to evacuate him. Moments later, another figure appears in the cockpit. Alan quickly radios a warning, telling the man he will be shot if he makes a wrong move. He is ordered to sit in the pilot's chair and slowly raise his hands. The man pleads to be taken off the plane so he can explain, insisting he isn't a terrorist. Alan then assigns a translator to speak with the boy, now identified as Elias, who is being checked by a doctor. But Elias appears deeply traumatized, lost in a daze. His daze pulls the story back to one day earlier. In a hotel room, we meet Nadia, Elias's mother, preparing for a flight. She's on the phone with her doctor in New York, where she and Elias are traveling in search of treatment for his mysterious illness. Elias later calls her, letting her know he has already packed their bags. That night, Nadia arrives at the airport and embraces Elias. Together, they pass through security and head to the waiting area. Before boarding, Nadia excuses herself to the restroom. There, she opens her medical kit, prepares a syringe, and swallows a liquid. Meanwhile, in the lounge, Elias strikes up a conversation with a man who just finished a phone call. They bond quickly over their shared interest in science. The man, named Farid, asks about Elias's parents. Not long after, Nadia returns, and the three eventually board the plane together. In the cockpit, a flight attendant named Julia enters, offering coffee to the pilot and co-pilot. She then heads to the galley to prepare drinks, telling a steward named 8-Ball to deal with a flirty passenger. The plane finally departs Germany bound for the US. Hours later, Nadia returns to the restroom. She opens her notebook, scribbles something down, and finds a photo of herself with her husband, Nikolai. The scene shifts into a flashback. At first it's sweet, but soon we see how the couple, along with their baby, face struggles after their car breaks down. Nikolai leaves to find help, while Nadia stays behind to watch over their son. Back to the present. Inside the plane, Nadia notices a commotion at the front of the cabin. 8-Ball is trying to calm a disruptive passenger when two air marshals intervene, but suddenly, 8-Ball pulls out a knife and kills one of them. The unruly passenger, revealed to be his accomplice Carl, incapacitates the second marshal and demands information about the third. 8-Ball orders another accomplice, Curtis, to take care of it. Curtis executes the task, seizing the third marshal's weapon and handing it over to 8-Ball. Finally, 8-Ball brutally kills the second marshal, unsettling Carl. Nadia realizes something is seriously wrong. 8-Ball storms into the center of the cabin, brandishing his gun to intimidate the passengers, ordering everyone to stay seated. The rest of the hijackers reveal themselves, herding the passengers to the back of the plane. Their leader, Berg, heads to the cockpit. When the door opens, it's revealed that the co-pilot, Bastian, is also part of the hijacking crew and has already killed the pilot. They open the hatch and dump the captain's body below. Berg announces that they have taken control of the plane, commanding all passengers to place their hands on the seat in front of them. Meanwhile, one of the hijackers, Yuri, finds the black box and begins reprogramming it, reporting back to Berg in the cockpit. Bastian then changes the flight course, which Elias notices. Panicking, he asks Nadia what's happening. She tries to comfort him, but Elias remains worried. He studies the cabin map and points out the best hiding spot to his mother. At the same time, Curtis forces Farid to move to the front. Carl attempts to restrain 8-Ball, whose behavior grows increasingly erratic. Elias seizes the distraction to slip away from his seat, with Nadia following quickly. But 8-Ball chases them down and shoots Nadia right in front of Elias. The boy is dragged back to his seat by Carl, who urges him to stay calm. In the back, Curtis reports the incident to Berg. Berg confronts 8-Ball, warning that if he acts out of line again, Berg himself will end him. Still, Berg uses Nadia's death as a warning to the other passengers. The scene shifts to Nadia's past. She waits in the car with her baby while Nikolai goes for help. After waiting a long time, Nadia steps out, following her husband's tracks into the forest. She stumbles upon an abandoned building and assumes Nikolai might be inside. But when she enters, she is horrified to see blood on the floor, the trail leading to the basement. Suddenly, something emerges from the darkness and chases her. Nadia locks herself in the basement, only to find her husband already dead. Out of nowhere, the mysterious creature tries to force its way in through a small window. Nadia fights back, but the creature bites her before retreating in pain, scorched by the sunlight. That scene indirectly explains why Nadia rises again. Yes, Nadia is still alive. She hears the sound of a dog in the cargo hold and makes her way down there through a hidden hatch. At the same time, Berg forces Farid and another man to read a threatening message for a recording. In the cargo hold, Nadia hides under a car while Curtis and Yuri enter to gather equipment for assembling explosives. Yuri begins setting up the devices, while Nadia approaches a dog and drinks its blood. The sound of the dog barking draws Yuri back to investigate. He discovers Nadia hiding, but she immediately lunges at him and kills him. Meanwhile, Farid returns to the passengers and takes a seat next to Elias. Nadia quickly starts to change into her vampire form. She feels her fangs emerging and desperately searches for her medicine to inject herself. But before she can, she hears Berg calling out for Yuri, warning that they only have 10 minutes before the jump. Nadia turns back to Yuri's body and drinks his blood, accelerating her transformation. Then she heads back up into the cabin. The hijackers lie to the passengers, warning that they'll release deadly gas if anyone dares move from their seats. They proceed to the cargo hold, where they find Yuri's corpse lying beside the dog. Nadia had deliberately released the animal to make it seem like the dog was the killer. Nadia makes her way to Elias. Her presence terrifies the passengers, who believe she might trigger the toxic gas release the hijackers had threatened. Nadia leads Elias to the cockpit, where they discover the pilots are gone. She returns to the cabin, asking who can fly the plane. A man named Ahmed steps forward, claiming he can, and joins her. Meanwhile, Farid explains the contents of the statement he had been forced to read earlier. Nadia, Elias, and Ahmed enter the cockpit and lock the door before Farid can follow. Outside, the hijackers gear up with parachutes, preparing to jump into the sea. In that moment, Berg communicates over radio with someone awaiting their extraction after landing. Inside the cockpit, Nadia continues to undergo her physical transformation, worrying Elias. Ahmed realizes the plane is on autopilot. Nadia checks the security cameras, watching the hijackers, and tells Ahmed to wait until they jump before taking control. But 8-Ball notices Nadia's missing body and becomes convinced she's still alive. He and Berg re-enter the cabin to search for her. A passenger points to the cockpit, and the two men approach, demanding Nadia open the door. Nadia orders Ahmed to redirect the plane back toward the US, even though Europe is actually closer. Reluctantly and fearing her, Ahmed complies. When the hijackers realize the plane has changed course, Berg threatens to kill hostages. To prove his point, he shoots a man dead and warns Nadia that he'll keep killing one by one unless she opens the door. He then commands 8-Ball to bring another victim. 8-Ball drags a young girl forward, and Berg holds her up to the cockpit window, showing Nadia. As Berg begins a countdown to execute the child, Nadia bursts out of the cockpit and attacks. She sinks her fangs into Berg's neck in front of Bastian, while Ahmed quickly locks the cockpit door again, taking cover inside with Elias. After killing Berg, Nadia goes after the remaining hijackers who flee to the cargo hold. When Berg begins to transform, Nadia hears strange noises and doubles back to finish him off. 8-Ball secretly witnesses everything. Nadia then returns to the cockpit door, telling Elias not to open it because it's the safest place for him. Nadia retreats to the lavatory and realizes her vampire form is becoming harder to control. Meanwhile, 8-Ball takes Nadia's bag and rejoins the others, reading from a notebook he found inside. He tells them Nadia is a vampire, but since Carl hadn't seen what happened earlier, he refuses to believe it. Instead, Carl becomes more disturbed by 8-Ball's growing madness, especially when he reveals a UV flashlight meant to weaken Nadia. Nadia injects herself again with the medicine and at the same time recalls the past, back when she cared for Elias as a baby while struggling to resist her thirst for blood. When the infant's crying became unbearable, Nadia growled at him before retreating to the bathroom, where she tore out her own fangs so she wouldn't hurt her child. One day, Nadia returned to an old house where she encountered an elder vampire. The man told her that children like Elias could never control themselves, and neither could he, even if he appeared calm. He then shot Nadia, declaring that all of them were cursed beings who could only bring ruin. Back in the present, 8-Ball carves wooden stakes while the others argue about their next move. Carl insists their only chance is to retake the cockpit and redirect the plane. Meanwhile, Elias sneaks out of the cockpit despite Ahmed's protests, finds his mother in the lavatory, and pulls her back. As the hijackers approach, Ahmed quickly locks the door. Nadia rises and confronts 8-Ball, who is armed with both the stake and the UV flashlight. He shines the beam on her, weakening Nadia until she collapses. 8-Ball orders the others to seize control of the plane while he stays behind to study Nadia further. He takes a syringe he'd found and fills it with her blood. Just as he prepares to drive the stake into her, Elias appears with a pistol aimed at him. 8-Ball tries to wrestle the weapon away, but the shot misses, shattering a window and causing sudden decompression inside the cabin. Bastian warns that oxygen will run out in 10 minutes and they must lower altitude immediately. Nadia quickly fits an oxygen mask onto Elias, grabs the pistol and shoots 8-Ball, who flees. At the same time, Ahmed collapses, unable to reach his mask while still holding the door shut. This allows the hijackers to force their way into the cockpit and regain control. Nadia rushes Elias to another section of the plane and entrusts him to Farid, just as the aircraft begins losing altitude rapidly. She then hunts down 8-Ball and finds him hiding inside an armored vehicle. Even after firing several rounds, her bullets fail to pierce the glass. The deranged man injects himself with Nadia's blood despite her desperate pleas not to. Almost immediately, 8-Ball begins to feel the effects. Realizing what's happening, Nadia knows she must stop him. She searches for matches and alcohol, then returns to douse the vehicle, setting 8-Ball ablaze alive. At the same time, Nadia recalls the words of the elder vampire, that they must never allow this evil to spread, that it must be stopped. Nadia brutally beat the old man, and just before she could deliver the final blow, he warned her that she would never truly control the darkness inside her. The plane finally stabilizes, but the hijackers notice the fire raging in the cargo hold and quickly spray fire suppressant. Nadia crawls her way back into the cabin. The hijackers open fire on her, sending the passengers into a panic as they rush toward the front of the aircraft. In the chaos, Farid finds Elias. The hijackers then discover 8-Ball, still alive inside the armored vehicle. Without warning, he lunges at Curtis, drains his blood, and bursts out to chase the others. Nadia immediately locks the cargo hold door, but at the same moment hears Elias shouting, warning her that the passengers are turning against her. Farid insists that no one will harm Nadia, though not everyone agrees. A man named Todd raises his gun and shoots at her. Nadia retaliates instantly, cutting through anyone who stands in her way until she charges directly at Farid. Fortunately, Elias steps in, managing to stop his mother before she can kill him. Todd, however, still has his weapon trained on Nadia. Suddenly, Nadia hears the screams of the other vampires still trapped in the cargo hold and declares that they must never be allowed into the cabin. She rushes down the stairs to hold the door against 8-Ball. Farid follows to help, but 8-Ball sinks his teeth into him and forces the door open. Todd shoots 8-Ball, and seeing Farid already infected, Nadia swiftly amputates his arm to prevent the virus from spreading through his body. Meanwhile, Curtis, now fully turned into a vampire, tries to climb back into the cabin. With great effort, Nadia manages to knock both Curtis and 8-Ball back down, saving Julia from being devoured. Afterward, Nadia heads to the rear of the cabin and encounters Bastien. Farid convinces the others that Nadia is fighting on their side. Nadia then returns to the cockpit with Bastien, who warns that the fuel is running dangerously low and they must find the nearest airport immediately. Farid and Elias urge Nadia to hide beneath the cockpit, away from the sunlight, while they remain with Bastien to help. Soon Bastien establishes contact with a nearby RAF base and reports that their plane had been hijacked, but the hijackers are now subdued and locked in the cargo hold. Meanwhile, Elias sneaks out in search of medicine for his mother, as the furious growls of the vampires below echo loud enough for the passengers to hear. Among them is the flirtatious passenger mentioned earlier, the one who had always seemed irritating. Now gravely injured, crushed between seats with no hope of survival, he makes a desperate choice. He descends into the cargo hold and begs 8-Ball to bite him, hoping to gain immortality. But 8-Ball ignores his plea and savagely attacks him instead. Nadia and Farid soon realize the plane has descended into utter chaos. Terrified passengers surge forward, desperate to break into the cockpit. Bastien refuses to open the cockpit door, while Nadia realizes that they cannot allow the plane to land, because if it does, the vampires will be unleashed upon the world. Farid suggests detonating the plane right after landing, but from a safe distance. They head to the fuel tanks to plant explosives, only to discover that they have only a short-range detonator, and worse, its timer is broken. Nadia volunteers to manually trigger the explosion once everyone is safely out. She explains to Elias that it's the only way, but he refuses to abandon his mother. Instead, he sneaks down to the cargo hold to search for the hijackers' long-range detonator, carrying a UV lamp for protection. Though pursued by vampires, Elias manages to evade them and eventually finds the device. On his way back, however, a vampire attacks him, causing him to drop the UV light. Watching from the cockpit monitors, Nadia rushes down to save him. She asks Bastien if the plane is on the correct course, and he replies that it's in autopilot mode, meaning anyone could land it with air traffic control's guidance. Nadia turns to Farid, asking him to promise to protect Elias. She then bites Bastien, absorbing his strength, knowing full well that this act will complete her transformation into a full vampire. Meanwhile, Elias is cornered as the vampires close in. Hearing his screams, 8-Ball claims Elias as his own and lunges for him. Just before he can grab the boy, Nadia arrives, and a brutal battle erupts between the two vampires in the cargo hold. 8-Ball sinks his teeth into Nadia, but Elias quickly comes up with an idea: blow the door open so his mother can push 8-Ball out of the plane. For a moment it seems they've succeeded. Farid watches in relief as Elias and Nadia survive, but 8-Ball clings to life, crawling back inside to finish Elias. In a desperate move, Farid disengages the autopilot and tilts the plane, flooding it with sunlight. The rays burn 8-Ball to ashes at last. Weakened and close to unconsciousness, Nadia is revived when Elias offers her his blood. She fights hard not to drain too much, holding onto her humanity for his sake. The story then shifts to the RAF base. Elias asks a translator about Farid and begs for his release. But the translator, showing his prejudice, insists that whatever Farid says, he will still be treated as the enemy. Elias pleads desperately, insisting they must save Farid before sunset. Unfortunately, the boy is sedated, and Colonel Allen takes command again. He orders the troops to wait, unwittingly giving the vampires aboard time to feed on the remaining bodies. The military tries to negotiate with Farid, urging him to surrender without ever grasping the reality of the situation. They ignore his pleas, and in the end they shoot him before storming the aircraft, completely unaware of what awaits inside. Meanwhile, Elias, en route to the hospital, tricks the medics by sedating them with the very injection meant for him. He grabs his teddy bear and leaps from the vehicle, running back toward the plane. Inside, soldiers are savaged by the vampires after disregarding Farid's warnings. Moments later, Farid spots Elias near a truck and calls out, but the boy doesn't hear him. When Elias reaches the plane, he finds his mother feeding on the blood of a soldier. He calls to her, only to realize with heartbreak that the figure before him is no longer the mother he once knew. Fighting back tears, Elias presses the hidden detonator button tucked inside his teddy bear. The plane explodes in a massive fireball, shocking Alan and his forces. In the aftermath, Farid, clinging to life, manages to find Elias among the wreckage. The two embrace in an emotional reunion, the only survivors of the horrific nightmare. And yes, Elias must also accept the heartbreaking truth of letting his mother go. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.